Welcome to Dysfictional, an RPG-focused podcast. I'm Ginger, professional film industry victim.
I'm Tukey, former academic gone rogue.
And I'm Randy, the random generator.
And what topics have you randomly generated for today?
Oh, well, I mean, considering last week, probably finish up the character sheet be a good idea. I think we still have the class background, and I mean, like, what's a character without its name? So maybe we should add that in there as well.
What's a character with no class?
And what's a character without a name?
Or a character without a okay, I think they get it.
A character with no class is
classless, really.
Classless.
Yeah.
That could be a choice, though.
True, yeah. The unnamed classless character.
I just meant they weren't classy, but it's fine. Ignore my puns.
No. I like it.
Should we kick it off with class then? Seems like maybe the highest level one.
Yeah, we could start with that one. Let's see. So with class, trying to create your character, obviously, probably one of the most important things you could decide on, I think, would be the class. It defines how you're probably going to do a lot of things and how your scores are going to play out, and even could relate to names. So, yeah. How do you guys do it with the class?
Ooh. Well, I think for my early experiences where I wasn't really in a group yet, but I was doing like a lot of one-shots with other people's groups, I would kind of just find out what their established group already had and pick something that filled a spot they needed more than picking for what I was interested in, if that makes sense. So I had a lot of one-off characters that were, mostly very low level, but for different classes that I've kind of never played again. Some of them I've sort of wanted to go back to because they seemed interesting at higher levels, but I never got a chance to follow through with them. But now that I'm with you guys, we're pretty consistent. I've been picking them kind of based off of who I want the character to be for the most part. Our underwater campaign that we did, a lot of it was specific to the fact that it was an underwater campaign, so it was heavily influenced by that because it had to be functional underwater. So part of it was the ranger build. And the primal companion, I just knew I wanted to have an octopus. But yeah,
for sure.
Mostly like what I want the character to be as a personality. What about you, Tukey?
Yeah, I definitely did kind of what you mentioned as well quite a bit for a while, where it was like figuring out what the group itself needed and then making sure that maybe to look through a class or classes that could kind of fill some of those roles. But much more lately, I've been kind of almost basing it on the, two things, the personality. So like almost, for example, rogue, and it's like a, like aggressive rogue or a timid wizard or something. Maybe that'll be a future character, but I've been pairing it with that. But the other one too is picking the class based on combat, I guess, or combat style too. So if I know I wanted to be more of like a melee, kind of like in the mix of things, I'll pick, maybe
or
look
not
through.
Have to deal with spells.
Exactly. Or not have to deal with spells. Wanted something simple back. I know I did a barbarian in one of the campaigns, and I didn't want it to deal with spells. So I just wanted something simple, just smack stuff. And I focused it on that. But yeah. And then the other one too, for me, this is maybe funny, but sometimes I've even just picked based on, I haven't done that in a while. This time, the current campaign, I'm playing a rogue, and main reason is I actually hadn't played a rogue before, so it was something different. And I also knew I wanted to be sort of I knew the kind of combat style I wanted to do for this campaign. So that was sort of what led into my decisions for it.
Yeah, I will say I do sometimes recommend against certain classes for like brand new players if they need it to be a little more stripped down because they're still learning the rules or something like that. Then they might not want to pick like a class that has prepared spells every day or something like that, that is a lot more, legwork in between sessions or like thinking on the fly.
Honestly, if you can get past the complexity that comes with the meta magic, I think sorcerers are one of the best spellcasters to start with because they have a very small spell list, but they're all really good spells. So while you are stuck with the spells, like it's harder to make the wrong choice versus a wizard who has, hundreds probably spells in their arsenal, and you can pick the wrong one and you're stuck with it unless you come across a scroll that you have to copy or, something like that as well.
See, I would have said Warlock, actually, because I feel like Warlock is simpler because they don't have as many spell slots, and they come back on short rest, so it feels a little more friendly.
Yeah, I can agree with that there. The potential with the fewer spell slots, though, is you may always want to hold it for that right moment, and if that moment never comes, then you're often resting without using your spell slots when you can short rest and they could come back as well. But that's a mechanic that they may not pick up right away either. But it does, like, all of this does kind of relate to, I think, the idea of a class, and in not contrast, but in a sort of similarity with subclasses, that you kind of pick your character based off of a style, either mechanically, for combat, for social interactions, or just for the flavor or the kind of person you want your character to be. Because if you want to be a charismatic character, then you're narrowing it down to like a sorcerer, a paladin, or a bard, those that based off of charisma. Or if you wanted to be someone that's a spell slinger or something, then you've got spellcasters. You go away with martial characters. But if you want to be a martial caster, you could be a fighter as the Eldritch Knight. Paladin kind of does that, and Warlock kind of does that. So it helps to narrow down when you kind of have an idea. And unless you know what kind of class you want to be from the get-go, it's usually better to wait a bit, because based off of the ideas you kind of pull together, there's a class that will pop out for those ideas. So at least help kind of narrow it down.
I've always actually kind of thought it would be fun to run a campaign where everyone starts off without one, and as you go, you kind of get assigned them based on what's happening in the story.
That could be a cool idea, almost like a level 0 character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like somebody, like if the party is all friends that live in a town that gets attacked by monsters, and like one of them right off the bat like makes a pact to save someone, or then they like, boom, now you're a warlock. And then like as they go, like one guy gets really good at fighting and now he's a fighter, and like the progression can take them through like a choose your own adventure, which is what D&D is anyway, but like as you go along,
that would prevent suddenly a full party of wizards showing up at the start of a campaign, which could also be interesting, though.
You could also do that by doing a kind of like Kingdom Hearts starter route, like pick your, path, and you got the fighter, the wizard,
the shield,
or the shield or something, and
sword, shield in the book
there, yeah.
It's been interesting too with our group. I don't know if before I joined you guys, if it was like this too, but at least the last 2 campaigns, the last one and this current one, as far as I know, none of the players discussed what they were going to be with each other at all. And so far, we have not overlapped classes.
And I think, ironically, this was the campaign I kind of said that. I believe I said that they could do that because they were specific functions that, the guild may or may not require, and being split.
But no one did.
But no one did. And yeah, so that was kind of funny because sometimes they do that, sometimes they don't. And there's no wrong with either way, because D&D is a game where you could be 5 barbarians or 5 wizards and still complete the entire campaign. So yeah.
It was just funny that we all picked, and especially since we're doing Gestalt and everyone's picking 2 classes, like none of our classes overlap almost at all.
Yeah. We almost had 3 rogues and then one of them switched, but yeah, for sure. Out of 10 class options, everyone's different.
Yeah, every class is different except for just the 2 rogue.
Yep.
It's because rogue is obviously the superior class.
In certain contexts, sure. But I think also pertaining with classes, even though not everyone gets their subclass at level 1, I always suggest at least that you have a subclass in mind or kind of play ahead. I personally always play ahead with my characters and kind of have the next few levels in mind. That way, if there's a feat or something, this is sort of a optimization that I kind of tend to be the kind of person. But like, if you have an odd ability score, well, a feat can even that score out because you always want to play in evens. And you could start out your character with an odd score, knowing once you hit level 4 or 8 that you're going to get this feat that will even it out. So you start your character planning on that feat. And subclasses, I feel like, are a very similar vein that you kind of probably play out with the idea that you're going to be this paladin of retribution or this sorcerer who's always like had a link with psychic, and then you kind of go the aberrant mind or something.
Yes.
Well, this current campaign for sure, for me, subclass really did come down to the style, like the fighting style for me of the character. Like the class itself linked, I think, a lot to her personality, but then the subclass really defined how basically how they're going to be handling themselves in combat. And then it really also paired, I mean, we've been doing Gestalt, so having 2 subclasses. So that also came into additional considerations of, okay, what does each subclass do for that character too? But yeah, for me this time at least, definitely the subclasses came down to style, I think, more than anything.
Mine, I think, came down to functionality outside of combat specifically, because I wanted to be a utility caster primarily during travel and things like that. Because the joke at the original joke of this character was that she wanted to be the cleric, but as a clerical aid, not in the church sense, but in the I'm the lead assistant kind of thing. And so her subclass I picked for her cleric subclass I picked for combat, but her warlock subclass I picked for utility because it allows me to do a lot more messaging and gives me extra slots for things like create food and water and just managing the group in between combat. So it was kind of split both ways with hers. But that was also because you warned us up front that was going to be a big part of the mechanics of this campaign. So I was trying to make sure that somebody was taking that job on.
Yeah, that's also why I think at session 0 is usually really important, because give the expectations and stuff, and you don't want a character to be like, I am really good at killing undead, and then you never have the campaign doesn't show undead at all, and you're feel like you wasted the potential with that character. But you also bring a good kind of point, something that's not on a character sheet that is also really important, is what kind of role do you want to fill, whether it be in combat or out of combat. You're kind of more of a support role, so the idea of a lot of stuff outside of combat to be supportive is a really big thing, while Tuki, obviously your character is a character that is much more in combat kind of style and focused primarily on damage, and then there are some people that are diverse in a little bit of everything. They try to be more jack of all trades, or they're just trying to be just doing the best they can out there.
Well, that was, so yes, that also, the focusing on damage as the example for my current one, that was definitely into some of the decisions, but it was even more so how they do the damage, the style of it. And then as far as the out of combat utility and stuff, because we started this one at a high level, Rogue sort of naturally has a lot of skills that they get, I'm blanking on it, but the efficiencies. So I also knew that was going to
Expertise.
be expertise. There you go. So I knew that was going to be kind of covered from there. So that, again, that's sort of why I focused on like the style and everything. But I even took into account, and I've done this on previous ones, how the class would give that character their experiences, like how that would impact the background of the person, or backstory of the person, and then even sort of how they would approach stuff, right? Like specifically a rogue swashbuckler or something, for example, like how would they approach a problem? So sometimes I'll even take that into account when picking, which is obviously not primary decisions, but can definitely be like secondary ones, or lead into how some of those other choices are affected too.
Yeah, definitely. Same for me. Like, I do a lot of deciding, how she reacts to situations by, like, you'll hear me a lot say, like, well, she's a healer, so, because it's not just like her class feature, it's like kind of a big part of her personality as well. So it like shapes how she would handle situation versus like kind of a do no harm approach versus what it would be if she was just a warlock.
Well, or you even mentioned the clerical thing, right? So like, a problem that comes up in your character is more like, okay, we need information, versus mine's like, well, can I just stab it? Does that solve this?
Yeah, cut off its head. We'll ask it later.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, like I said at the start, I think class arguably has one of the biggest impacts, and you've already kind of established that creating your class kind of helped establish your background of the character, not just the backstory. I personally try to save the backgrounds for later. I kind of create the class, sort of build it out, and then find a background that fits what my class is, and what the kind of style I'm sort of going for. Like, I know you kind of later on had your rogue who eventually you're like, they're kind of a loner, maybe kind of some style like that. And then you kind of went with sort of like an orphan, and then you find one that kind of fits that or something. So, yeah.
Yeah, I actually picked background for both this character and the last one. I picked it both based on the backstory, actually. So I had the backstory written, and then I was trying to look for backgrounds that would like make sense for that backstory that I wanted. In this case, yeah, it happened to be an urchin for the current character.
Yeah, it's very rare, I think, I've ever started with a background. I've had a backstory, like my druid was already started with just a dwarf who's raised as an elf, and then kind of build everything from there. And then it sort of manifested into the druid because, the left out, and then that kind of manifested into the sage background. But I have had occasions where I would actually have a background first, like you kind of like the soldier is a pretty common one where you're already thinking about being a guard or something like that, so those already fit right in, and it's just right there in daylight for you.
It is interesting with background though, that like, I mean, you're just kind of mentioning about it maybe being like almost a secondary thing, and it could, by all means, you could start with background, and then even base more things off of that. But
for sure,
it does provide, the backgrounds do provide actually quite a bit of utility towards the character, especially like languages and the tools, the efficiencies they might have, which seem minor but could actually be pretty big. Again, I tend to work the reverse, so I'll pick, again, have a backstory, pick a background that fits it, and then take pieces from the background that I can use into the personality more, or the experiences they might have, or some of the like hobbies the character has, or ways of making money. But yeah, either way, it's definitely effective.
And I mean, if you pick something like, again, a soldier first, it kind of tailors into maybe you're going to be some sort of martial character from there, probably a fighter as the kind of stereotypical fighter soldier sort of style. And then we're, of course, talking about more of the flavors and the building the character as sort of a natural sort of progression, rather than optimizing a character where you're a martial, you're not a martial, you're a like strength based character, so you want something with athletics, so you look for a background that has athletics, and hey, soldier has athletics, perfect. So then you kind of pick that because it kind of it gives you the proficiencies in something you need, and that could be a thing too where some of the backgrounds provide you there's a dog barking, that's great. And that could be a thing too, where some of the backgrounds provide you with proficiencies that you're actually looking for your character, like getting herbalism for your druid, for an example, because they may not get them naturally, which I think they do, but or alchemist or something like that. Like going back again to soldier, they have vehicles as an option that you can't really get anywhere else from a background.
Yeah, someone should have got that.
Yeah, someone should have.
It's okay. One of our NPCs had it. It's totally fine.
Yeah. You're lucky you had 4 NPCs that helped with survival and background and learning how to like traverse
and navigation.
Yeah.
Unnecessary. But it is funny you mentioned the proficiencies, because I totally have done this before, where I'm like looking at the character I've created and realizing that no matter all the choices I made, it gave me like the exact same 2 or 3 proficiencies overlapping. And then I'm like, well, that's not good.
Yeah, I've done that before too.
The good thing is with Tasha's Cauldron being introduced as well for 5e is that it allows, I believe it's the background. You can actually change the proficiencies of the background to something else related. I think you can drop a skill to a tool, but you can't up a tool to a skill, something like that, which is kind of neat as well. It allows a little more flexibility into a person's character and stuff without having to be locked into being a sage because they're the only ones that have, something with nature.
Right. Yeah, I did not go sage for my next one.
And that's a fair point, because just because you're a druid does not mean you care about nature. Which,
Well, it also depends on your circle, though, too, because some of the circles are a lot less nature-y than others.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And some of them are a little more based upon, nature versus elemental versus death and stuff like that. So a lot of cool options there with that. But once you've had all of this kind of built together, how do you guys create the name? You just roll them into a random generator, or do you actually try to figure it out yourself?
I kind of just figure them out myself. They sort of just come to me. I spend a lot of time on Hero Forge making a mini, and like as I'm playing around with like what the look is and everything, usually it just sort of comes to me.
Not sponsored, but Hero Forge is amazing.
Not sponsored.
So I've done this a few different ways. 2 characters back was a cat, or a Leonin. So he got named after a pet that has since passed away, but he got named after that a little bit differently. I took like the nickname for it and then mixed it up from there. Previous character was a monk, so I spent way too much time looking up a bunch of names of philosophers and then took pieces from different names of philosophers and combined it with sort of the environment. He was a water genasi, so sort of combined it with that and ended up with a first and last name that way.
Oh, that's funny. I didn't know that.
Yeah, same for his family too. Like the character's mother and father were also different famous philosophers, like pieces from their names.
Hilarious.
And then the current one, I honestly can't remember why, but her name was gem based. So first and last name and the parent's name, and even some of the like close contacts or whatever, close friends were based on gems. But to be honest, I don't remember why I got to that point. I think I was just trying to think of some names, and that came up as an idea for it.
I will use the random generator to get sort of base ideas sometimes, the fantasy generators, but I find that usually it helps me land on a first letter. And then I go like, oh, I like the look or the feel of like that as a sound. And then I still end up kind of writing my own after that. My particular character I'm playing this time has a name and a nickname. And they both start with D, which was unintentional. And then I met the rest of the party, and everyone except for you, Tukey, all of our names started with D.
It's just the D's team.
I had a last name that started with D.
And your last name is still D, yeah. So we have so many D's in this campaign, and no one discussed it. It was just sheer. And there wasn't anyone in the last campaign whose name started with D at all. So it wasn't like a trend. It just sort of happened.
Yeah, and I've definitely done, I think, a mix of both. A usefulness with the random generator, especially I think it's fantasy name generator is what it's called. They actually tell you how the characters, like how certain races like have these names and stuff. One of the crazier examples was Goliath, that they are born with the name. They have a name as a clan, and then they have a third name that is by their greatest achievements up to this point. So that name can always change, which is a cool idea for, going across that, like at some point, you just kind of throw out, well, now I'm Night Slasher. And you're like, oh yeah, that did happen, I guess, but so I've used that for particularly last names and stuff too. I don't remember if Coachella was a random generator, but I remember my druid Iris Willamai was me looking up plants and trees and stuff and coming across to kind of that point where it was Iris and a willow tree. So yeah.
Oh, nice. So Domino, her nickname is Domino, and that did actually come from an item that I had in the shopping phase, like before the campaign started.
Not Deadpool?
I had no, not Deadpool. I had as her charlatan background that she did a lot of cards and dice games and, a lot of gambling. And she took the charlatan's die, which is a magic item that is basically a rigged dice set. And I just liked Domino as like her alias, like her on the road alias. But her actual name, Delisle, she's named after Grey Delisle, who voiced Azula in Avatar when she was a kid.
Nice.
And now she's the voice of Lady Briarwood in Vox Machina. So she's been two super evil characters I've really liked a lot, and I always thought Delisle was a cool name. But it's her last name, but I took it as her first name. So that's where a lot of her name came from.
I also just remembered why I went with gems this time for this character. So it was actually, this character's name was from her appearance. So I already knew that she was going to be a tabaxi, and then I already knew I kind of wanted it to be like a snow leopard style look with like piercing blue eyes. So then based on that, I was like, oh, okay, hold on, let me look up some gems for blue. And I didn't want to go with like normal ones. So I looked around and ended up finding silica, which is a blue gem.
A desiccant. Yeah.
Or that. But yeah, that's actually, I just realized that is where her name came from. It was the appearance, had a big part of it.
Yeah, I miss her beautiful blue eyes. It's a shame what happened.
They're still there.
I also had my very first character was an orc barbarian. Sorry, no, that was actually my second character. But my very first character that I had a little more fun with was an orc barbarian who I purposely had his name almost very hard to pronounce. His name was Baruch Hanun Dragal, and he was almost immediately, I believe, called Bruce for all the players. And the fun part about it was he would say that name and they would go, what? And then he would never repeat it.
Nicknames too actually have a big part of it. Like especially the previous,
for sure,
the previous one who I knew, it was the one from all the different philosophers, but I also immediately wanted to make sure he had a easy nickname, and it was just his full name was Nanoviro, but the short name would just be Nano, and which also caught on very quickly. But yeah, I've definitely also shaped names by making sure it has a good, easy nickname for it too.
I think it's more fun. I wouldn't say more fun. I guess for me, like, I think it's actually fun just to have a name and then see if they come up with nicknames on their own. Or, you of course have your own nicknames in mind, and then people come up with other ones, and you're like, I didn't intend for this, but I guess we're going with it. And then, you kind of roll with the nickname. You're like, all right, well, I guess I'm known as D's now.
We're all just D's.
Yeah. Look at all the D's.
Another interesting thing too is actually using the character name, I'm trying to think of how to describe this, but for other usages with the character itself. So for example, Lex, a couple characters back, his full name was like almost sort of a trigger for him to snap back out of stupors. Like if he ever kind of went into a rage mode or whatever, one of the things that got him out of it was essentially hearing his full name, but he never used his full name with the party. It was something that I think came up a little bit randomly or something like that, or maybe he eventually used it. But yeah, you can kind of play with how the character's name maybe does have some interaction with how they behave too.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, mine has done a decent amount of switching back and forth between the alias and her real name, and some like not intentional all the time. Like if she's in a headspace where she's feeling more like herself, it tends to slide into the alias, and vice versa. And other characters have picked up on it too at times, and like different characters call her different things now, which is interesting because it didn't start off that way.
Yep.
So then from here, having the name picked out, I think one of the I guess for some people it could actually be your first thing, but how would you go to create your voice from that point? Or would you start with the voice and then like, haha, that's a silly voice, I'm going to create a character based around that, because I've done that.
I've never done it that way. I've always gotten the character first and then played around with the voice. I think I told the story about my Yanti Casa being French just because I wanted to practice my French for work. And that was just sheerly circumstantial. Like it had nothing to do with her background, her appearance, anything. It was just like, I just want to practice sounding French. But yeah, I don't know. I think for Domino, it was just me wanting to sound like not me. Because it's easier for me to, especially since we play over Discord and we're not in person, it's a lot easier to, and we're not always on Facecam, depending on like how the internet is going in everyone's various house. Like it's easier.
Connections.
Yeah, it's easier for me, I think, to signal that it's the character talking if she just sounds nothing like me. So that was the main drive for that. It took me a few sessions, I think, to kind of click into her voice, though. It was a little bit tricky.
I also think while you don't need to change your voice more than maybe like a slower tone, and this is now your character voice, just these slight changes can completely change the way you talk, but also allow other players to realize your character versus your not character. Because like right now I tend to talk a little bit faster, and we even have a player who it's much more useful to have that character voice, because then we know when you're arguing with a character or something that it's in character and it's not a person who's just mad at you for something and you're like, I'm sorry, I don't want to go home and be upset about this now.
So oddly enough, I never really did character voices until the last couple. I may have done like some mannerisms here and there before in previous ones, but not too much. And then I think the first one that was a full voice was my previous one, which was also French. And that was the funny thing, is that both Ginger and I, without talking to the other person, ended up with a French voice in the same campaign. But the reason for that was
without ever even having met the other person
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah. But actually, the only reason that I ended up doing that was I mentioned that person's name was from put together from philosophers, and the primary one was a French philosopher. And it also happened to be the only language that I had ever even taken before or could speak at all. So that is why I went with a French accent for that one. The current character, though, so technically the primary voice for this one I'm doing now doesn't have a character voice. It's just the verbiage. So the primary voice of my current character, they tend to be a little bit harsher speaking, use a lot of curses, which is completely different than me. I very rarely curse as I'm speaking. So
what the fuck?
Exactly. So that's the primary voice, but then I do have character voices for her disguises or her whenever she's basically trying not to be herself in the world, like hiding herself.
And yeah, even just changing the kinds of words you use, as you said, can help out a lot with a character voice. I think the way that I always tend to go about it is based off of the race I am, because like if I'm an orc, I kind of bring out my lower lip a lot to kind of pretend like I've got tusk or something, and then kind of start creating characters from there. You always got the gnomes that are a little more nasally, so you kind of got that little easiness with it, and then you kind of create from there where you're a little more soft or something. And I've had that's how, as a DM, I can create character voices a lot easier, because a lot of races already have a sort of built-in sound, at least, of a race, and then you could change the pitch of them, and then now they're a new character for that. For most of my characters, I kind of had a similar aspect. I had, although I didn't have my dwarf be more the standard dwarf, even though I'm told I do good dwarf impressions, but he was much more very barely spoken, but he was thinking he was an elf, so he kind of steered away from the stereotypical dwarf. And then Rin was Rin was interesting because he's a minotaur, and I just kind of wanted to be someone with a big personality, so he kind of had a really large sounding voice and just command the room, and thought he had a lot of charisma, but he really didn't.
I think for Domino, what ended up influencing her voice a lot was actually just her status. So there's race, class,
the proper.
It was the fact that when I was picking a starting amount of a living situation, I just said noble. And as a high elf and a noble, I was like, oh, she's gonna sound a little bit more posh, a little more formally trained. And so giving her that very sort of stereotypical Lord of the Rings, all the elves are British kind of accent actually helped shape the way she speaks, because I, as a person, cannot say things like, okay, in that accent, it doesn't sound right. I have to say all right, so she uses different specific words than I would use. So in addition to the accent being part of it, it's the words she would use versus words I would use that makes us sound, feel like a different entity.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've also definitely no shame have done cat puns because she's a tabaxi. I mean, you got to find the perfect moment, of course, but I've definitely looped those in before.
Yeah, we're still waiting to get a real purr out of you in a session.
Yeah, exactly.
Never. Actually, this character though, because of all the disguises, I've ended up doing a lot of different character voices / mannerisms. Again, some more defined than others, but yeah, I've actually done more than I normally would on a single character.
I mean, this is arguably the first character you've really delved into, so it's like having that creative overload in a sense as well, where you kind of want to do all these things, and then you kind of have a character that can do that, so you're like, well, I'm going to kind of chest out the waters and do a few more voices and stuff and see how everything goes.
What's in this box?
Yeah, exactly.
What's in this box over here?
Ooh, another piece of candy.
Yeah, I never got to hear your voice for the fourth one because it was all text.
That's the point. They don't have a voice.
Oh,
They don't have a name, no voice.
Which to be fair, there are another subject to talk about would be side chats.
yes.
So I'm sure this is a pretty controversial topic for people in general, but I think how people feel about outside session talking and character development and stuff. I'm personally for it as a person who likes to build backgrounds and stuff that doesn't amount to much in a campaign. There's also especially in Domino's case, where she'll use stuff like commune and spells that can gather information off session. And then at the start of the session, her character can go, hey, I've got information. And it's a really easy way to provide players with knowledge and the tools to go into the next direction without having to be like, hey, there's this NPC that shows up and goes, I have a letter of importance.
Like a courier just shows up. He's like, I'm here to advance your quest.
yeah, exactly.
Because you idiots were getting nowhere.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it kind of started as, for this campaign at least, it started as sort of pure utility. Like you said, because I'm Pact of the Tome, Warlock, I have a book that allows me to do free sendings to like a whole bunch of people. And I can also talk to my deity and my patron, and I have like a lot of research spells, like divination things, and we just needed like a thread to put it all in because at the end of every session, she'd have questions. Yeah, like 12 or 15 or however many it grew into. But then as it went on, it started involving outside session RP between characters because I would use the book to communicate with party members in situations where no one else would have heard what we were talking about because it was all telepathic. So, and most of those were pretty small. Like they were just like check-ins or updates.
Yeah.
Messaging like an NPC that we needed to check up on or something like that. And it started off kind of that way. And then it became a much larger thing that ended up happening.
This campaign also had a large countryside, or I wouldn't say countryside, an entire country's worth of space. So having the ability to communicate without having to send a courier or something was very handy from my perspective as well.
Yeah, and we knew it was going to be a long campaign in game time, like several years, and that we would be covering a lot of area, and then sometimes we would have like a whole month of downtime. So there was
or 3 years.
A lot of sessions where that was not downtime. There was a lot of months in the game where in session you would say, what are your downtime activities? And we would do those roles and find out like if you worked a job, how much money did you make or whatever. But in the character's life in that game, you had a whole month to like talk to your party members, and you don't want to just have these long spiraling character development conversations during session because everyone only has so much time in their schedule. And, if I was talking to our dwarf but then I also wanted, like, if everyone wanted to talk to everyone, that's all that we would do in session. We would never advance the plot. So, we started taking them to side chats, and it's been really fun. And usually it's retroactive, right? Like after the session's over, we go back and we say, during the last month, we would have talked about these things. So it's not ever playing ahead, which I think is important too.
And as a person who's been watching them, sometimes you guys make the jabs of what's to come, like, oh, what's the worst that could happen? It's like a dragon's going to attack us in next week, and then you guys had just fought the dragon.
Yeah, that's fun. That's just for us for fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because I was not into the side chats much at all until recently. So, I mean, I not that I was like against them. It's just I didn't actively go to participate in them per se, or I couldn't necessarily think of ways to do it. And then this campaign definitely changed that because we had that time skip, which then ended up giving me some ideas for. We just talked about this the other day, but almost like thinking of it like a psychology case study for like the events that happened to this character during that year or two, and then coming up with cool ideas. However, definitely went a little deeper than I probably should have / ended up wanting to. But it was cool. It's been a lot of fun playing them out in the side chats of like the characters, like personalities or characters' psyche, basically.
And for you guys, I think it worked because you guys already had a history together. So it kind of added an element to the history. It's kind of like one of the things I really like doing with characters where if I've had a history with it, I'll make up a story we had together or some sort of war story, basically. And we've never talked about it, but now it's canon that we've been through this event together. And it kind of creates that depth for your characters to sort of have. And even though you guys are doing it in more of a current way where as the events are unfolding, you guys kind of have these private conversations about it, it's still adding this, like, they have this relationship that the other players can feel, but they don't know about.
Yeah. And like you said, we already had backstory together to begin with, so that was always there a little bit. But since all of the time skip stuff, it's been drastically different, I would say, both dynamic wise and like mechanic wise, as far as it plays out in sessions. And it I think enables people to really, if you want to really dig in, right? Like Tuki, you were saying, like you really dug it and really ended up digging deep into the psychology. If you really want to dig into a character and you want another player to like help you bounce that off of someone, or like you need someone to participate, right? Yeah. Like it has to be at least two people. It could be more, but it has to be at least two people that are like, okay, let's get into this.
And the DM may not always be willing.
Easier. Yeah, it's easier, I think, if you are not super comfortable with like really deep perspective style RP on the fly, especially like during a session or in front of other people or on camera. It helps to be able to do it through text, because then you can think about it a second before you just come up with a response. Like, I know there's been times in sessions where I've made like for lack of a better term, an acting choice in the moment, where later I've been like, she would have actually probably done this slightly differently or worded it slightly differently. And so when you do the side chats, you get really experienced at knowing what your character would say, because you have time to really flesh them out a lot. And then when you take that experience, spending that extra time with them back to the session, it helps you respond faster and have less regrets about how you responded later on.
And even just the text form, like I know for myself, the text form, I feel more comfortable. I feel like I can very well describe like the emotions and what they're doing, how they're saying it in text, more so than I either can and or want to do it in a session. But I still think, kind of going back to, we were just talking about this before too, but going back to you said about how they're retroactive, right? A lot of the side chats. And again, other people could have completely different beliefs. Personally, I don't think the side chats should progress beyond the story of the session.
Correct.
And or involve other characters. Like, I think one of the things, at least I know I've done, is really not bring up other characters in the side chat, other than like, random name droppings, but like, don't somehow develop a grudge towards a character in a side chat or something, or
right. Yeah. Like, we're not splitting off to talk crap about the other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, I almost really none of our side chats have ever involved or brought up other characters. And I think that's actually been good, because then at that point it would almost be more fun to have them in it, have like a group side chat then in that case, if they're going to be involved in it in some way.
Yeah. It's always like a one-on-one character development exercise between two characters for the most part.
Yeah, and like I've been in person where people are sending text messages to each other, because of course you're in person, but you're still trying to talk to the other person. One of the things that I personally kind of do is I've had my character with another friend that we all play with, that him and me did a lot of not side chats, but we were whispering each other. So side chats in session. And a lot of it was because him and I would be out at night together. He doesn't need to sleep, and then I'm kind of the nature person, so I never stayed in a tavern or something while everyone else did. So him and I had a lot of alone time to be able to talk about things, and we actually talked at one point about a loophole that we were going to try to create in him becoming a vampire, and it worked. So that was really cool. And it was something that we were able to do because we had those moments where we were able to talk without having to be around the party. And I think that's a big thing too, is like having a side chat when it's appropriate, not just, hey, we're going to do this, even though we've been at camp together for the past 6 months, where it's a lot harder, unless of course you have telepathy and things like that to kind of, make it all a mute point when you're together. But if you guys are together, then there's always going to be even the possibility that someone's eavesdropping, or you guys just walk off on your, something that like provides the rest of the party where they either know something's going on, or like you guys pick the times to do it, I think is an important play, so that even in the moment they can have some potential involvement too.
Yeah, definitely. I think you coming up with the plan about becoming a vampire is a good example of a warning I was going to give, which is the DM is always included in the side chats, right?
Yeah.
So whatever you're planning, they know about it. If you try to plan something, or if you are having this really deep heart to heart, with your characters, like best friend or whatever, and you admit like your deepest fear, like the DM read that, like they know, and they will use all of that stuff against you. We live in constant terror that stuff from our side chats is going to come back to murder us all later. But that's what makes it fun.
Oh, yeah. And I'll be honest, we didn't tell the DM about the loophole thing, and we kind of just, he killed my character and then ran off to go angry at Lich, and, kind of rolled it like that. It was like, yeah, so this all happened. And then kind of going through the rules, and we're like, hey, it does say this. And then he correctly played it back as well, that like it's supposed to be, this is the Curse of Strahd, by the way, spoilers, but like it's supposed to be that you're supposed to kill someone that like either reveres you or loves you, something along those lines. I don't remember the exact thing. And like my character, I was like, I think my character would revere you. That's like a good possibility with that. And then so we're like, well, what if like you killed me, but then someone resurrected me or revived me? And my character was the character that's like, well, if I'm meant to die at this point, then I've died by your hands, but if I'm not meant to die, then I'll be brought back. And then one of our other players revived me, and it was a character that he kind of had a little bit of history with my character too. And I was like, oh my God, what happened? Are you okay? He's like, I'm fine. Like everything happened as it was meant to happen. And then, as they were going off to potentially rescue the other person from the Lich, I was like, no, he'll be back. And then they just trusted me, and we moved on. And then like the next day, he's back with the party. But yeah, the DM rolled the punch, I'd say, pretty well, and then made him not being able to harness the full powers of a vampire because we cheated it. And I was fully okay with that. Like, yes, we cheated the system. It is 100% okay that we didn't get everything back from it. But it kind of fit the way that our characters were going, because we kind of had the conclusion that Strahd was weak, quote unquote weak, because he was on his own, while my vampire friend and I were stronger than him because we were it was both of us. I was going to be the vampire's advisor at that point and be kind of his logic, the wisdom, you would say.
Well, we tried to have a side chat without you one time because we knew that you were driving and we didn't trust you not to read all of your notifications, and you got really mad at us.
No. It wasn't because I was driving. It was because I was on a vacation and I was very bored.
Yeah.
And then I had to catch up to these side chats.
It was also the one time where apparently it was going to potentially play into the session too. That obviously we had no idea about, but
yeah. And now you've even seen a little more of the side chats kind of having their bits of interruption, we'll say.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that's cool.
We just want you to have a nice vacation, Randy.
No, I don't. It wasn't my family.
Oh goodness.
Oh no.
The other topic that you kind of mentioned, which maybe this will be for another day, but the like you mentioned about the vampire not being the full vampire, right? And that sometimes can be really interesting too, is like not getting something for getting something, but getting something for like the story of it for your character. I know I've talked about this with you, Randy, multiple times. It's like sometimes I don't even care what, like, it's not always about getting something like a new ability or whatever else. It could also be just for like story stuff, you know? But maybe that's more of a topic for another day.
Yeah, I definitely am one of the people that struggles with things that evolve my character in a negative way, because I don't like to take the dark route in video games. But ultimately, we usually figure it out.
Oh, they're so much fun, though. I mean, I literally was trying to goad you into making my character a vampire for weeks. And it wasn't even because I wanted any more powers. I didn't even care about the powers. I just wanted them to turn into a vampire so I could change them again. More personality stuff.
Yeah. Like, I think one of my personal favorite things is providing flaws to people, like cursed items, like something that has a penalty to some power, because it adds a lot of development to like figuring out like how this is going to affect your character, and it can evolve your character in, even if it's a negative way, it could be positive for the story itself, which kind of puts into the topic of being open to your character dying, which I guess we can talk about next time.
This is the Flash Round, where we take turns creating the bones of a character that anyone can use. If you play one, let us know who they become. Roll initiative.
I rolled a 2. So I am definitely not first. Unless you both roll 1s.
I also rolled a 2.
All right, Randy, what do you got?
Oh, no.
I got an 18. Woo!
Okay, so then we got Randy first, and now Ginger and I have to do a roll-off.
Oh, crap. I'm not ready.
Rollies. Nat 20.
I rolled a 3. Technically an improvement.
Nat 20.
All right,
Randy
so
still goes first, though.
Randy first, followed by Ginger, followed by Tukey.
Okay.
And for my 18 roll, I'm going to be as stern as a hobgoblin for the race.
Oh, okay. That's fun.
Threw you the fuck off.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about the only hobgoblin I know is the one that Brennan played in A Court of Fey and Flowers.
I thought it was just a villain in Spider-Man.
That too.
True.
That too.
It's fair.
That too. Okay, class for a hobgoblin. What would be unexpected? Like if a hobgoblin wanted to kind of
Be all hobgoblin-y.
go against the grain of his clan.
Oh, anti-hobgoblin-y.
Yeah, it would be
Rage against.
Yeah, it would be fun to have a hobgoblin that was a wizard.
I'll join up with you, Spider-Man.
So we got a hobgoblin wizard with a divination subclass.
Going with them nice scryings and stuff.
Yeah.
And he's a little bit shorter than the rest of the hobgoblins. Got a little bit of a light pink skin to him as well. Or her. Actually, it'll be a her.
Okay, for background, I think for divination wizard, I'm going to go sage for the background. I think that makes the most sense for our divination wizard. She's like the oracle of the hobgoblin tribe. Give her a lot of fun clothing options.
Well, let's see then. For their flaw, they need to know. I don't know what, but they just need to know it.
Oh no, she's Randy.
just everything, whatever it is, they need to know it.
And I mean, her quirk is that she just has a lot of accessories to show off, but she doesn't want to talk about it.
It'd be fun, like little bits of bone on a necklace.
Yeah, but I don't want to talk about it.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You don't want to talk about it. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'll forgive you this time.
Right. My bad.
It's okay. Just don't do it again.
Aggressive.
Her phobia is going to be not being accepted by other wizards.
Aw, poor thing.
Her biggest fear, because she's worked really hard to become a wizard, and she wants respect.
But she can't get none.
Exactly. Maybe she can. We don't know. We don't know what her story will be.
Well, for item and trinket then, we're going to go with really nice looking diamond encrusted earring loop, right?
Ooh.
But it's completely fake, and she has no idea that it's fake.
Oh, that's not going to help her with the other wizards, Tukey.
Well, maybe they think it's real.
No, because she doesn't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
See, there you go.
They'll never know.
Exactly. Doldrug the Watcher will never tell.
Ooh, I like it.
I like it. It has a whole title.
Yeah, figured it fits with the divination.
All right, well, good luck to you, Doldrug. You got this, girl.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this session and want to hear more, you can find us on Twitter at DysfictionalPod for our latest updates and downloads.
Original music for this podcast is provided by Joshua Silver, the artist known as Dimanon on Spotify.
And remember, this week in your travels, if you meet a quest giver, make sure up front that they're not planning to pay you in exposure.